Okay, thank you all for coming. I'm Deborah Costine. I am a member of the Friends of the Burnett-Garfield House, and I am very happy to be sharing with you some of the information and photographs, images that I have come across over the past year and a half or so. When the teens did their protest back in the summer of 2014, I knew only one thing about this house. One thing, and that was that it was called the Garfield House. That's all I knew, nothing else. And then as we started working to try to save the house, I came across somebody who said, there is nothing historical about that house. And I thought, it must be. So I started looking into it. So my program, therefore, is about who lived in this house and what did they do. Joseph Burnett is the man who built the house. He was the son of Charles and Keziah Burnett, who were farmers, and Charles's father, Charles the farmer, was also a rope maker. And I've heard that down on Gilmore Road, there is actually what's called a rope walk. That is something that was used, a long system for braiding and pulling out the rope. Joseph Burnett is descended from Mary Johnson, one of the first settlers of Southborough. The other settler, who was the first one, was her brother. Joseph is descended from Mary. He was inspired by his uncle Joel Burnett. He studied at the Worcester College of Pharmacy. Then, when he graduated, he got a job working in Boston, working for the Metcalf Pharmaceutical Company. Key point in his career, the first one, was he was hired to mix the first ether that was used for the very famous surgery at the Ether Dome at Mass General Hospital in 1846. And that is because he already, either through the Metcalf Pharmacy and his association with it, for the quality of his compounding ability. Then, this is, I think, one of my favorite parts of the whole story is that in 1847, a customer, a woman came into the shop who had been living in Paris, and she asked him if he could possibly come up with liquid vanilla extract, as she had been accustomed to using when she lived in Paris. At first he said, well, I'm a pharmacist and I'm a chemist. It's really not what I do. But then he did it. He started working on it. It took some time, and he did. He produced a very, very effective, well-appreciated vanilla extract. So that was in 1847. Burnett's vanilla extract rapidly became a huge success. That same year, he met the lovely Josephine Cutter of Boston, and they married a year later. How many of you are familiar with this scene? I'm sure everybody. So this is Deerfoot Road right here, and this is the bridge that one would cross with the dam over here. But this was taken before, sometime between 1850 and 1895.
1894, yeah.
Thank you, Al. 1894. It was built for the purpose of processing the stone to build the house that Joseph and Josephine were going to live in. They decided that they would like to live in Southborough, back where he grew up. He had started buying up farmland, and this building, which is still there, not in very good shape at the moment, is still there, and this is what was built. Now this is the way it appeared not originally, because in 1850, when it was first built, it was a simple two-story house with a gable roof. But then, as his fortune and family began to rapidly grow, in 1860, he added on another wing, this part here, and the tower. This is the way the house looked from Main Street. The best I can figure would be sometime around 1910. It was after the Sudbury Reservoir system was built. And I can tell because of that, I don't see any Deerfoot Farm buildings over here. Would you agree with that, Al?
Say that one more time.
This was after the reservoir system was built.
Yeah, I do agree with that.
Yeah, okay.
So it'd be after 1898.
Yeah. So you can see how attractive it was. There was a veranda or a veranda porch type thing here, and these porticos, all of those eventually were removed. Joseph began building Deerfoot Farm just across the small-ish Stony Brook, across from the house. And in 1854, he began importing the Jersey cows from England. And then later on, the Guernseys were imported actually by his son Edward, when Edward took over running Deerfoot Farm. So here's the family that lived in the house at 84 Main Street. You can see here is Joseph and Josephine and 11 of their 12 children. They had one son who died at before he was even a year old. A few of the ones that we'll be talking about later, this is Edward, the oldest son, and this is the Reverend Waldo Burnett, who became an Episcopal minister, and for a time was the minister at St. Mark's Church. And this is what people have been referring to as the flat dog. It's we think it's a bearskin rug. And Ruth, who became a nun, left the Episcopal Church to become a nun and more. And Esther, so I'll continue on with, but that's the family that grew up in the house on 84 Main Street. This photograph is dated November 29th, 1897. And that was because that was when it was decided that the city of Boston was running out of water and they needed to expand the reservoir system. So everything in the planned reservoir had to be demolished. So this is a picture of that demolition process. And you see this is being scooped out, the buildings are being taken down, and they're actually creating a bit of wall here, earthen wall. Edward Burnett's house is behind Deerfoot Farm. That was built for when Edward took over running Deerfoot Farm later on. I'd like to spend a little time talking about the legacy of the Burnett family for Southborough. Most people are aware that in 1860, Joseph established and then built St. Mark's Church in Southborough. He was not raised Episcopalian, but when he met and married Josephine, he converted. I really like this photograph because this is one of the earliest photographs of St. Mark's School. This is when it was right on Main Street, right at the corner of Main Street and Route 85. So if you see this stone wall here, that is heading north toward, heading north up 85. And Main Street, this house, which had been the home of Dr. Hobart, was facing Main Street that goes this way. And so when he first started St. Mark's School, he used existing buildings that were right in the center of town. So here's a little map to get you oriented. Here's Route 8, what is now Route 85 here, and then Main Street. Here is 85 Main Street here, and Burnett property here. This is all Burnett land here, and a great deal down this way, and right here as well. This is Sawin's Mill. That there was a mill pond that was made. It was called Parker's Pond. In fact, that little section of Southborough was called Parkerville because there were a lot of Parkers who lived there. Here is, right here, the little square that represents Dr. Hobart's house. And up here is Pilgrim Church and the town hall that at that time was a wooden frame building. By the way, if anybody has questions or pertinent comments, I'm happy to hear them. So, speaking of the town hall, Joseph was the chairman of the building committee for the new town hall, and he was also a major donor. In 1852, I think it was, Colonel Francis Fay went to town meeting, determined that Southborough have its own library, and he held up a bag of silver coins, suggesting that everybody give what they can to support a new library. It wasn't, however, until 1911 that they were able to complete the project, and it happened following the donation of this land that we're now on that was given by the Burnett family. Because it was Colonel Francis Fay's idea, even though he was long gone, his son made sure that it still had his name, which now it's not called the Fay Library, but originally it was. How many people recognize this photograph? I think this one is fun because I walked past this photograph dozens and dozens and dozens of times. It's right here in the library at the top of the stairs in the display case. And one day I opened the display case and came with my camera and photographed it. So these are the children of Joseph and Josephine. This is Josephine and Esther, Ruth, Louise, and Eleanor. And this is their sons Edward and Harry, Robert, Waldo, Charles, and John. Most of them had very remarkable, productive, civic-minded lives. The first son, Edward, after graduating from Harvard, he became president of Deerfoot Farm. He married Mabel Lowell, who was the daughter of the poet and diplomat James Russell Lowell. He imported the Guernsey cows. Back then, milk was all about the fat content, and Jerseys and Guernseys had their milk content, the fat content was very high, and they were known, both breeds, for having a very docile manner. In 1886, he was elected to Congress in the Cleveland administration, and he served one term. And then after that one term, he turned his focus to what he really was particularly interested in, which was designing farms. And he became known as one of the preeminent designers of numerous model farms for the estates of the Gilded Age. For example, one of the best known is Biltmore, the Biltmore Estate in Asheville, North Carolina. If you look at early photographs of the barns, see, if you had this big estate, you needed a farm to go with it. And Olmsted, Frederick Law Olmsted, was also involved, as was Edward, in the design of the farm, and Olmsted the whole property. And it was seen that if they wanted to have the lush grounds that they wanted, they needed a lot of manure. So that worked for having a good-sized farm as well. Edward also was very much involved with the Florham estate of Florence Vanderbilt in New Jersey. New Jersey, thank you, Sally. I came across late one night, I should have been in bed, but I couldn't stop reading more stuff about Edward, and I came across a research paper that was done by a graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania. The topic of this graduate student's paper was Edward Burnett. And so I was reading the paper, and I came across her main source of information, which was a book published in, I think, 1912, around there, called Modern Farming. Numerous times through the book, a farm would be mentioned, and they would say it was actually done very much like Deerfoot Farm in Southborough, Massachusetts. And that book had numerous printings. So he was considered to be the leading farm designer architect of the time. And the reason for that is, if you think about it, is that he grew up on a farm, he had run a farm, and then through his work, working closely with the architects, he could contribute the necessary information of what you need for a really good farm. The architects knew about building, but not quite so much what a farm would need. So he had a foot in both sides. Robert Manton Burnett became the manager of Deerfoot Farm after Edward left. He was quite an inventor. One of the things was the milk-shaped bottle, not the kind that, at least that I visualized, but it was shaped more like a bowling pin. One day, a man came into to the farm. He had invented a machine that would homogenize milk, but he didn't have the funds to make the machine. So Robert established the Manton Manufacturing Company for the purpose of producing the Golan Manton machine for homogenization. He bought the Taylor home on the corner of Main Street and School Street and renovated it, remodeled it into Southborough Arms, a hotel and restaurant, and I understand a watering hole, and was quite useful for the families that were visiting St. Mark's, visiting their children studying at St. Mark's. He was also a selectman in Southborough. After the original Deerfoot buildings down on Stony Brook were demolished, the new Deerfoot Farm was built around 1897 and sits where Trotter Middle School now is. And here's one little bit that I really like is, see this ramp, earthen stone ramp going up into the barn? It's still there. The access to the back of Trotter from Deerfoot, if anybody's done this, there are two, a road in and a road out. They go on either side of that earthen ramp. So that was one of the earliest photographs of Deerfoot Farm. You can see the steeple of Pilgrim Church right there. And then this was later on. The pig was their trademark because they also were famous for their sausages. Ruth Burnett, the renegade of the family, converted to Catholicism and became a nun, but being a Burnett, she didn't stop at that. She became a Mother Superior at the School of the Sacred Heart in Manhattan. And as she stayed with it, progressing through the growth of the school, she became its first president in 1919 when it became Manhattanville College. There is a building on the campus of Manhattanville College called the Burnett House in honor of Mother Ruth Burnett. I don't know what RSCJ stands for. I should have looked that up. Louise Burnett married Charles Francis Choate, and she and Charles bought that house for the purpose of giving it to the people of the town for civic social uses. Esther Burnett and her husband George gave this 60-acre golf course. They gave it actually to St. Mark's School, but it is a public golf course. So I'm just going to go back to this for a second, because what I like to talk about is that if you're standing at the intersection of Route 30 and Route 85, you look around, you see, well, this town doesn't have a gas station at its intersection. It doesn't have a Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks, and it doesn't have a convenience store or a bank. Instead, it has the community house because of the Burnetts, St. Mark's Field because of the Burnett family, and the library because of their contributions toward the construction of the library. We were very happy to receive photographs from Abe Garfield, who grew up in the house, and this was taken during his mother's declining years. And it was very nice to see how great the house looked not that long ago. We had first heard these were taken around 2006, but then he said he thought more like 2000, but still not that long ago. I love the appearance of this woodwork. The main entry. Abe told me that his parents, Irvin McDowell Garfield, and his mother, Eleanor, Fay, she was a Fay, bought the house from George and Georgia Burnett, and that Georgia did not like embellishments, and she actually took down some of the very elaborate crown molding because she felt it was just too much. And he also said that they found that some of the marble fireplaces using different kinds of marble, she felt that was too opulent, and so she painted them. So here are just a few noteworthy connections. James Russell Lowell is connected because Edward married James's daughter, Mabel, and Irvin McDowell Garfield was the grandson of President James A. Garfield. Robert Burnett's daughter, Lila, married FDR's first cousin, and this is a nice little story about pears. Joseph was a lifelong member of the Massachusetts Horticultural Society, and they often had their annual meetings, or they did sometimes have annual meetings at the house on 84 Main Street. And he was everybody knew about his famous pear tree. Well, that particular year, the pear tree did not produce well at all. And he knew they were all expecting to see magnificent pears. So, not to let them down, he went into Boston, bought a couple bushels of pears, and brought them back and tied them onto the branches of the tree so that there would be pears. And they all duly admired the quality of his pears. But I understand that after lunch, he fessed up and told what he had done. The Boston Terrier, Edward, was a member of the group of people in the Boston area who are responsible for the breed of the Boston Terrier. And Isabella Stewart Gardner, Esther Burnett married George Peabody Gardner, whose Uncle Jack was married to Isabella Stewart Gardner. So Esther's aunt was Isabella Stewart Gardner. And later on, Esther Burnett Gardner and her husband had a summer home in Southborough, which is, if any of you know Charlie Margaritas, right on Main Street, opposite the end of Sears Road. That was their house. Just about all of the 11 children did have a home in Southborough, pretty much within shouting distance of 84 Main. So I don't need to, these are when I'm not here to describe it if it's just playing in a loop. So, Al Bezanson will take it from here. Al lives nearby to 84 Main. It might not be a bad idea. You have to just loop it over your ears. How does that feel?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see, to advance this,
To
Debbie?
advance it, just push this
Okay,
button right
okay, I
there.
got you.
Yep.
All right, Back to the Future. This was 2 months ago, and I'll tell you a little bit about how I got involved in this. I live about 4 minutes walk from this house, and I lived there for 47 years. And before that, I lived in Northborough. I grew up on a dairy farm where we did everything Deerfoot Farm does, except we did it in a primitive way. We had our own cows we milked. We bought milk from half a dozen other farms. We had our own dairy. We pasteurized it. We had our own milk routes, a couple of them. We bottled milk for a couple of other people that delivered milk in Marlborough. And the funny thing, I was aware of Deerfoot Farm then, and I really didn't know much about them. Well, the house, just like Debbie, all the time that I had lived there, I really didn't know anything about this house. It was the Garfield house to me also. And so when those girls called it to our attention back in 2014, I got interested and I started poking around to see what I could learn. Now, this one, Debbie already kind of spilled the beans on this. I was going to ask the question, does anybody know about this house? Do they know who lived there? When? Do they know what happened to the house? And when and whatever became of it? I've been asking around town, and the latter part of that is I can't find anybody that knows what happened to this house. This was the house that Edward Burnett lived in, and then his brother Robert. And Debbie has already mentioned that Edward's father-in-law was the poet James Russell Lowell, who, by the way, spent some of his last years in that house. Ed was also friendly with President Grover Cleveland, our most honest president. And Cleveland stayed there when he was campaigning in Southborough. So there's a lot of really interesting history about the house, except it's already forgotten. You know, it had a short life. Well, here's where it was. The in the center, where's that pointer?
Behind
the table behind you.
Here we go. All right. The house we're talking about is here. It's pretty fuzzy. By the way, this is from this is a painting. It's on a postcard. And I found this at the museum, except it seems to have gone missing now. This would be the mansion. And Deerfoot Road, Parkerville. This would be right about 1898, right after the reservoir went in. And there's a stable over here that's still there, right about, pretty fuzzy, yeah, over there.
Yep.
And when I moved to Southborough in 1969, thereabouts, the Onyafrock family lived in that stable. Now it's on Bill Picardi's land, and it's a really interesting building. Right next to it, there's also a historic carriage house. So this is now 1898 was about 37 years before I was born. So now think about this. In about 1.5 lifetimes ago, that's what Southborough looked like. And one of the things we're talking about is preserving that stone mansion. Like, stone houses last for millennia. So, you get to be my age, you think about a year, it's just a little blip in time. So, anyway, okay, more about the house. I found a book, I guess I found it downstairs here in the historical section, and it was written in 1955 by Joseph Burnett's granddaughter, Esther Cunningham, and her other grandfather was James Russell Lowell. And it's a really interesting little book that gives you an inside look at the family. There's 57 pages about that house, which is this one, which she calls the house Deerfoot Farm. And she's an excellent writer. Well, so if you want the inside story on Deerfoot Farm, here it is. Can you read that? Because it tells you the origin. That basically Joseph Burnett had 12 children and he needed the farm to feed them. And so there you go. Now, and the book, by the way, is really filled with all kinds of anecdotes of the family history. And there's a couple of copies downstairs in the, what do you call that room down where the historic collection is? But you can't take them out of the library, but you can read them. Now, the farm, Debbie already covered. Debbie took a lot of my stuff here. But I already told you, I guess, that I grew up on a farm, so I feel connected. Well, here's another thing. This farm was right between that Edwards house. You could, from the 84 Main Street, from the backyard, you could drive a golf ball right over the top of this farm. It was that close, right across Stony Brook. And Deerfoot Farm went on to become, first of all, the sausage operation. The sausage was nationally advertised on the radio. It was a symbol of quality. People like financial people would talk about business models, and they'd talk about Deerfoot was a quality symbol like Apple computers. Their advertising slogan was, "Our sausage costs more, try it and you'll see why." That consistently fetched a higher price in the market. Now, along with that, they had the dairy business. And their milk, their cream, their butter, again, commodity, fetched a higher price because of quality and really brilliant marketing. They had their own retail stores in Boston and New York City. And the whole hallmark of that family, because it was Joseph that started these businesses, but his sons, particularly Edward and Robert, that ran the business, the theme that runs through that was really a dedication to quality, to technical innovation, and really, really smart marketing. So, and by the way, Deerfoot Farm, for a period of time, accounted for more than half of the wages in this town. Now, so what happened, when the reservoir went in 1897, or just prior to that, the farm had to go, so they built new farm buildings down there by Trodia, and here they are. And there's something very distinctive about these barns in that they have a second story. You see how they come up with a narrower with that long row of windows. And I thought that was pretty unusual. I'd never seen anything like that. And by the way, I traveled all over the country for 35 or 40 years, a lot of it, on farmland, and I've seen thousands of barns. And I never saw anything like that until last summer I went to Biltmore down in Asheville. And the barns down there have the same distinctive, those long, upper story, which by the way, was really the purpose of that was for light and for ventilation. Well, about Biltmore, which Debbie already told you a little bit about it, but Edward Burnett was one of the principal actors in Biltmore. This is Edward holding up the tree here, and then next to him was Richard Hunt, who was the architect that designed all of the mansion at Biltmore. And then next to him on the right, George Vanderbilt. On the ground in the middle, Frederick Law Olmsted, and on the right, Hunt's son who helped him. Right in the beginning, Vanderbilt got Olmsted to come down there and help him design the whole works, which involved taking the top off a mountain so that they get a better view before they built the mansion. And it required a huge workforce. And so they grew crops to feed the workforce. And I think Debbie mentioned that what happened is Olmsted told Vanderbilt, you better get some cows so that you can replenish the land. Well, and Vanderbilt, he didn't know how to do anything on a small scale. When he built a farm, it was something. By the way, I took that photo last summer. That's just a little corner of the Vanderbilt mansion. Now, this is the farm, and the farm buildings. And again, they have the same distinctive features as Deerfoot Farm. And even though they're attributed to the architect Hunt, the fact that Edward Burnett was there, by the way, his job was two things. He was the purchasing agent for the whole project, and he was the architect for the farm, and he did all of got the herds of cattle and all of that. So, to me, this has the signature of Edward Burnett all over it, which is kind of ironic because here in this town, his house is gone, nobody knows anything about it, and so there you are. Now, to carry that further, they've repurposed those barns. They're all still there. And now it's a winery. And it's the most visited winery in the United States, and they get over 600,000 visitors a year going through that barn, those barns. It is quite an operation. And I've seen photos of the interior of the later Deerfoot barn that was down by Trodia, and there are some real similarities in the overhead structure there. Can you all read that? It tells a little bit about the history of their dairy business. What started as a farm to feed the people, ended up turning into one of the biggest dairies in the Southeast, and it went on for many, many years. Well, when they finally sold off their dairy business, they kept one thing to themselves and didn't sell it. And you see there's a little, there was a little refreshment stand down there. Biltmore Vanilla was the one thing that they withheld and would not sell that recipe with the rest of the business. So, where did I ever get that idea? Now, back to the past. When Esther Cunningham would step out of that house and go visit her grandfather, she would, and come through the farmland, she would come to Stony Brook right here, which is now, expanded to a reservoir. A lot of you have seen this photograph, which was taken in 1893 by the Boston Water Board, just prior to doing the project where they went in and, converted it to a reservoir. And of course, the stone mansion would be just to the right, just out of the picture, but you can see the summer house is quite prominent, that little one with the steeple. And that one still exists. It's been moved. It's up closer to Deerfoot Road. You can also see through the trees the little stone shop where the stone was cut to build the mansion. You can see the carriage house next to it. And you can see over on the left through the trees some buildings. Well, that's Sawin's Mills, which prior to that was Parker's Mills, which prior to that was Bent Mills. And the first settler that came to Southborough in 1664, Peter Bent, built a grist mill right there. So that little place is, goes way back to the beginning of Southborough. And by the way, right behind the grist mill, which is, now it's the open channel of the Wachusett Reservoir. Before it was wider and it was called Parker Pond. And it was very important. The Burnett harvested the ice off that pond for Deerfoot Farm. So, okay, now we're back to the future. Well, a stone house, because I live so close and because I got interested in this whole project, I'm one of the friends of the Burnett-Garfield, I've gone down there and taken a lot of photographs, and it's almost like that stone is like a palette for light. Depending on where the sun is, it's always a different color. It gets very interesting. And this is a photo taken in January of last year, 2015, when over from the Parkerville side, right after sunrise, when the sun was just glinting off the windows there. So finally, one last photo here. Now, here's what I could say about this. When I took this photograph last fall, I was standing in what used to be the barnyard of Deerfoot Farm on the Sudbury Reservoir Trail on protected land that belongs to the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation, looking across the reservoir, which is listed in the National Registry of Historic Places as part of the Metropolitan Water System, which is quite a story in itself. Looking right there at the side you see of the house, this would have been the main entrance side. If you remember one of the earlier photos that Debbie showed, she had the grand piazzas and all of that. So there you have it. And as I think I might have said, I think about a house like this, it's young. It's not that old a house, but it has the potential to go on forever, if people would just, do. So I'm sure that you all have some questions right now. I'm a little bit deaf, so I'll have to ask my wife Phyllis to. Say that again?
You're going to tell them it's an island.
Oh, yes, thank you. Well, you know, this property, 84 Main Street, is bounded on 3 sides by roads. And then on this side, which is the south side, by this protected land. So you might say it's like a little island. And one of the things that probably we're going to be confronted with or considered when it comes to think about the historic preservation of it is whether or not there'll be access to people in the town. My own feeling is the potential for that property is to be, I mean, it would not be a huge project to restore it to its former beauty. And I think, you know, I personally, but I think a lot of people would be satisfied just to see the whole place put back together and restored. So, but the unique idea that you can walk all around the border of 84 Main Street, all 4 sides, and admire the place. How'd I do?
Okay.
All right, this is Phyllis, who's much better known in this town than I am. So,
8 o'clock?
I'm done.
Okay. Thank you. Well, we are very happy to have here with us tonight Selectman Paul Semino and Joe Hubley, who is chairman of the Southborough Historical Commission. And I got that right, didn't I, Joe?
Yes.
Good. And they are ready, willing, and able to answer questions, not so much about the history, but if anybody has one more burning historical question, we could go with that. Or you might like to ask questions to find out where things are now. We put it that way with the house. You guys want to come up? Anybody have one last burning question while they're on their way up here?
What year did the tower come down?
Oh, that is the question that we've been asking and wondering. I wish we knew, and if I went into the town hall and really dug, I probably could find out. But in the photo, we have a photograph before and after the hurricane of 38. It was not there before the hurricane of 38.
It
So,
wasn't? Wow.
yeah, so that was it. All right, you guys, take it away.
Any others? I mean,
Okay, yes.
So, Paul, great to see you here tonight.
thank you.
One question that I had is, some of this information that we're hearing tonight, can any of this be conveyed at town meeting? Is there, how much time would there be for a short presentation of the things that we've just heard about what this means to the whole town? I mean, if people knew.
So, it's a good question. At town meeting on Monday, there will be 2 warrant articles, number 13 and number 14, that will be presented to the voters regarding purchasing a preservation restriction on this property. There will be a presentation made at that time, mainly by Joe, as chair of historical, who's going to speak to, you know, why historical is supporting those articles, why we're looking to use money from the Community Preservation Act to purchase the restriction, and, you know, certainly the presentation that gets made can be as long or as short as we want it to be. I mean, it's sort of a balance, it's sort of a happy medium for those of you that have been to town meeting, and certainly this year I encourage all of you to come to support the articles. But you know, there's a balance between how long you want to present and then have time for discussion and questions, and, you know, obviously then the vote, and then the rest of town meeting, and still try to finish it up by Tuesday night. But I think there will be a fair amount of history and also a fair amount of explanation about what it is we're asking the voters to do. So it's a good question. Where do you go to school? You go to Neary School? Yeah, part of what we are hoping the owner will do, in addition to preserving the property, is to host kids from either Neary or Trotty or once or twice a year at the house, in conjunction with something the school might do in terms of teaching the kids about the history and the heritage and so forth. So depending on what he does with the property, it may or may not be open to the public generally, but something like that is something we're hoping he'll do. So, anything you wanna add,
And
Julie?
we've found that too, that it just keeps coming up, that it is a shame that there is so little known or nothing about something that was so significant, and that it really somehow should find a way into curriculum, even a day or something.
Yes.
So if a restriction gets passed, what cannot be done to the property?
So the very high level explanation of that is simple. What the town is going to be asked to do is to purchase a preservation restriction, and what that will consist of is the owner's currently has rights. It's private property. It's his house. He can do whatever he wants with it. Anything you could do to your house, he could do to this house. What he'd be giving up is a few things. One is the right to ever demolish the house or any of the other buildings you heard about as well. He'd be required to preserve those structures, not only in their current state, but actually fix them up. And then the third major component is that he would be prohibited from subdividing any of the other acreage. Because you could fit, believe it or not, 3 other houses on that parcel without knocking this house down. So he would be prohibited from doing that as well. So that restriction would get recorded at the Worcester Registry, and it would be, that would be the conditions forever, whether he were to sell it someday or, those restrictions would last forever. And the town would, through the Historical Commission, would hold the rights to enforce that.
So is there a cost involved to the town?
So there is, the town's appraisal, to give you an idea, the town had, and specifically the Community Preservation Commission had an appraisal commission with regard to the property. And the appraisal values the property overall if he were to knock it down and build houses. In other words, how could he make the most money? And the answer to that is the value of that, if he were to do that, is $1.8 million. In other words, the value of the individual lots developed. If he gives up all the rights that I just described, so that he can't do any of that stuff anymore, he just has to keep the grounds and the property, as is and fixed up. The value of what he has left without any of those rights is $775,000. So the delta, the difference between those two numbers is $1,045,000. That would be, according to our appraiser, the value of what he's selling to the town. Now, the actual purchase price of the rights is going to be a little bit less than that, we think. We know it won't be that number. It should be somewhere in the 900s. For various reasons, he's come off that top number. Where do we get the money? The answer is one of the articles at town meeting is asking to bond Community Preservation Act funds over a period of 10 years to pay for the preservation restriction. Meaning we would borrow the money and then pay it back over 10 years. And each year of those 10 years, the money to pay it back would come from CPA. For those of you that don't know, the Community Preservation Act is a state law that cities and towns in Massachusetts can opt into, which we did as a town over 10 years ago. We're a very, very small, I believe 1% surcharge on your property tax bill funds the CPA account to to be used for some very limited purposes: open space, recreation, historic preservation, and that's all. That's, I mean, it's called the Community Preservation Act for a reason. So the money to do what town meeting is being asked to do is already there, or will be as over time if we do it as a bond and we pay a little bit each year for 10 years. There will not be an increase in your taxes. What it will be, though, is, you know, money used, CPA money used for this theoretically can't be used for something else. If there's some other recreation or open space or historic cause that somebody may want to support, they may want to support it more than they want to support this. I'm not aware of any specific competing, you know, idea that people have out there. But, you know, there are always other things, and there's always good other things. So, you know, that's part of the, even though your taxes aren't going up, if you use the money for this, you can't use it for something else. So that's a valid consideration. You know, I would argue, and I'm not subjective, or I'm not objective. I mean, if there's a more, Joe, you would say it better than I would. If there's a more fitting use of CPA money that we've ever had in town, you know, or at least equivalent use, I'm not aware of one. For those of you that were here at the time, 10 years ago, we bonded a significantly more amount of money to purchase the rights to Chestnut Hill Farm. So I believe it was $5 or $6 million at the time, and we're just about to pay that off now this year. I believe is the last payment. So the town owns, you know, development rights to the whole Chestnut Hill Farm, which I believe is about 60 acres, which, you know, could have been quite a few single-family houses if the town didn't act back then.
100?
This is similar.
108.
Hey
108.
Sally, 108 acres?
108.
108, Chestnut Hill. So,
How long has the house been vacant?
2006? I think the last Garfield descendant vacated the house in roughly 2006. The house was sat vacant for a while. There were various attempts to auction it. You know, the Garfield family had put it up for auction, and I forget which year it was, but it famously got no bids at all, you know, to buy the house. Eventually, the current owner purchased it, and you know, as I'm sure a lot of you know, 2 years ago, he's never lived in it. The current owner has never lived in it. The house is vacant. And by the way, those are beautiful photos of the inside. Debbie, if anybody's been in I know a couple of you here I see, and if anybody has been in the house recently, the inside of the house looks nothing like that now. I mean, it is a shell. And you know, what the amount of work and the amount of investment that the current owner is going to need to put into the house, either to make it livable for himself or to turn it into a bed and breakfast, which is he also has the right to do. It's an idea that he's floated, is tremendous. Way more money than he will get from the town for his rights. So it's a very significant personal investment on his part to carry through with the plan that he has. But as I say, it's been vacant since about '06. He purchased it, I want to say maybe 2010. And a couple of years ago had a deal to sell it to a developer, which is when, you know, Bridget Brady and her friends got the picket signs out, and here we are today, still fighting to keep it up. So
I want to add that, Paul, the CPA money is also contributed by the state, so there's a match.
Good point.
So it's not just Southborough money that's going into the purchase and preservation restriction. It will also be state money. But I applaud Alan and Deb for your presentation. I've lived in town all my life, and I didn't know half of what transpired there at 84 Main. What a great presentation. Run that right off the top of your head like that. That's pretty That's pretty cool.
The vote on the articles requires a 2/3 majority at town meeting, because the town would be acquiring an interest in real property. So whenever the town buys property or buys rights in property, it requires a 2/3 majority at town meeting. So that's not as nearly as easy as just 51-49. And so turning out to vote and encouraging, you know, your friends to come to vote in favor of this if you are in favor of it is important, because getting that 2/3 is, you know, a challenge.
So you all have to bring 10 friends if you feel that this is an important part of Southborough.
Does the owner use the preservation money for, is it a stipulated thing, or can he put it in his pocket?
Nope, that's a very good question. So the preservation restriction is used, what we're purchasing is his rights to knock it down, to develop it, to subdivide it, and once we do this, once we do that, if we do it, then he can't do any of those things anymore. But what he, you know, that is the most important sort of concept here. There are some requirements in the preservation restriction document that, as I said, he fixes up and keeps up the outside. If he wants to leave the inside exactly the way it is today, he can do that. You know, he's not obliged to do to live in the house. He's not obliged to do anything with the property other than to maintain it and to keep it up. That's the, you know, that what you see there. I mean, that's the legacy that we're trying to preserve. I mean, the alternative obviously is, like I said, he could do anything he wants, right? So.
Anything with the preservation restriction, that what he wants to do, if he has to develop a master plan, that has to be approved by the Historical Commission here. So we do have oversight on anything that gets done, especially the plans that he submits. We want to make sure that nothing changes as you see it. If there's going to be a plan, we're going to approve it, and, you know, make sure that things are done accordingly.
What I mentioned at the beginning, just to expand on the question just a little bit, is important when you know, to the extent that people wonder about the owner's motivation. You know, 2 years ago he had a deal, and when the girls came out, he withdrew the deal. The 2 years since then, he's been working with the town to try to come up with, you know, an arrangement that works for everybody. But as I mentioned when I talked about the appraisal, you know, if he wanted to, he could turn around tomorrow and sell this for $1.8 million. So not only is he giving up some very substantial rights in exchange for the purchase price that I mentioned, and taking on the obligation to keep up the outside. You know, I believe he is very interested in doing much more with the property than he even has to. He's a very historically minded guy. I mean, I'm not pretending to be objective. You know, I'm very much in favor of this, so I don't want to suggest otherwise. He has a large historic home in the town of Carver. He's one of the, I think he's the second longest serving trustee of Wayside Inn in Sudbury. You know, he is he's one of the few people, I believe, that even could do a project like this. Right. One of the things people ask is, why don't we, you know, early on, they don't anymore, but they, you know, they said, well, why doesn't the town just buy the house? Just buy it, right? And then we don't have to worry about any of this stuff. Well, then what will we do with it, right? I mean, we don't have millions more to sink into it, right? And so having both the means and the knowledge of how to you know, make it sort of a civic treasure that it once was is something that we're lucky he has, I think.
What was his plan for buying it?
When he bought it?
Yeah.
You know, it's a good question. I think it's changed a lot over time. from different things. I think at one point he planned to live in it. He has a family. He's married. He has 3 children. At one point he planned to live in it. He has lots of business interests and different business interests. Took up a lot of his time over the last couple of years. I don't know if people know, he owns Adaville Railroad in Carver. So, and they opened Thomas the Tank Engine land there this past summer. So he's been, really wrapped up in that, which is one of the reasons there was a lot of talk about this about a year ago, and then it kind of died down for a while, and we're back at it. So, he's had various plans that have changed from time to time, but he will tell you that whether live in it, develop a bed and breakfast, what he's hoping to avoid is having it demolished, seeing it developed. I'm not going to paint. He's a businessman, right? So it's not realistic to think that could never happen. If for some reason town meeting doesn't support this, he's got a substantial asset there, and I don't think we can count on his I don't know what's the right word, forbearance. Part of this is what does the town want, and if the town is willing to support this, that obviously is something that means a lot to him, and if we're not, why should he, right? So
How much did he pay for the property?
in 2010, I want to say 2010, I don't know if that's right,
Eight.
but I know the number. He paid about $850,000 for the house, when nobody else wanted to buy it. So good
How
for
many
him.
rooms does it have?
Pardon?
How many rooms does it have?
It has 11 bedrooms, and then it has, 6 or 7 other function rooms. A kitchen, a billiards room, a ballroom, a large dining room. It's on 3 levels.
And a lot of fireplaces.
A lot of fireplaces. He plans to renovate the interior into an 8-unit bed and breakfast. There would be 4 rooms on the 2nd floor and 4 rooms on the 3rd floor.
Like the hotel for the school family?
Well, it would be an opportunity for visitors to both private schools to really have a really high-class place
Perfect house for
to
it.
stay. I think that's tax revenue, for the town, and a great, vibrant sort of continuing use for the property. So he has a variance from the ZBA to do that. He had asked for a permission to run an antique store out of the stone house, or the carriage house off to the side there by Deerfoot Road, and he didn't get that permission, but you can always ask again at some point, I suppose. So. The friends of the Burnett-Garfield house, have the last 2 years have done a tremendous amount of work, sometimes without a lot of knowledge of what was going to happen, which is hard, to publicize what's going on with the house, to think about how best to support the preservation of the house, and we certainly appreciate that they persevered as long as they have and are responsible for events like this. So, Krista Brady in the back row. I don't know if you call yourself the president, the chair?
No, I do not.
Well, what does everybody else call you?
Member of the Friends of the Burnett-Garfield House.
Our fearless leader.
Yes, the fearless leader of the Friends. We appreciate that. Of course, mother of Bridget, who was the original sign carrier.
We are a
So-
multi-talented and extremely passionate group
Yes.
that have come together. So it's definitely been a team effort. And this, Al and Deb, the history that they have unearthed is so inspiring.
Yeah. I mean, we have, Debbie mentioned the corner of 85 and Main, and the fact that we don't have a lot of, sort of commercial chain type business in town, and that our center of town looks a lot like it did 200 years ago, with Pilgrim Church and Town Hall, now the Townhouse, St. Mark's School, et cetera, Community House. I mean, you know, we're lucky that the two private schools, this house, I mean, we have sort of a brand that we don't even really think about until the prospect of losing a big part of it happens. So, you know, that's why I'm very much, I mean, this is, we couldn't, the question is this worth saving, and if so, for how much? You know, there is some point where the dollars would get too big, and that's what town meeting has to decide. I don't think we're anywhere near that, but, you know, so I'm not suggesting, you know, we would save the house to the detriment of everything else that might be important to people, but saving this house in a responsible way, I think is something we can easily do as a town.
If everybody contributed, say, $27 each.
Well, you could say that about a lot of things. So I don't know that I would go there, but it is you know, we are asking to use Community Preservation Act money, which is a very you know, limited scope that it can be spent on. No, you know, don't let people tell you, geez, if we didn't do this, we could buy, you know, another police car, or we could hire another first grade teacher. No, we can't. I mean, the money is, like I said, recreation, historic preservation, open space. I'm missing one. There's
Housing.
Oh, affordable housing. So, you know, other than those, so those are the four categories, and obviously this fits.
Do they get funneled into sort of buckets?
If we bond this purchase, then the dollars, the price per year for 10 years will come out of the historical bucket, is what I understand. I think at town meeting, when we get to that point, the CPC chair will speak to that specifically. You know, what bucket the money comes out of, et cetera.
So when the money gets accumulated, there are these like 3 parts, and
Yes.
a certain amount goes into each, one for housing, one for
Open space.
and the other for historic preservation.
And recreation.
In any project that comes along for the CPC, project has to meet its criteria, has to be of historical significance. This project is of any, this is the largest that I'm aware of in town.
Chestnut Hill.
Other than Chestnut Hill, for the open space, this is the first opportunity we have as a community to save a structure in the property forever. And it's not just this owner that we had to take into consideration. It's owners down the road forever. I'll be long and gone when the next guy has to deal with whatever owner down the road. So we want to make sure whatever we do now protects the town in the future. And I can't think of a better project than this building right here. Growing up in Southborough, I used to go to the dairy farms, get strawberry milk up on Wolf Pen, Waveney, and they're all gone. All the historic buildings are gone. The Southborough Arms are gone. I don't want another building to be gone. This is very important to this community. You may not realize it now, but your kids will, their kids will, and I think that for you to be here tonight, you care also. So it's very important that we get the support at town meeting and to get this passed. And I think we have a great shot at doing that. A lot of people have worked very hard. The Friends group what a great group to organize. And I just saw a lawn sign out, and I actually changed my Facebook profile picture to the lawn sign. Giving a little advertising, but so hopefully we'll see you all at town meeting. Thanks.
Yes, we want everybody to not just promise to come to town meeting, but talk to your friends. Chrissy, do you have something you want to?
And actually come.
And
You
actually
can say it
come.
tonight, but Monday you have to actually get in your car and come to town.
right.
Wallace assured us that hopefully
yeah.
this will be up on Monday,
Oh, yeah, we'll be Monday.
not Tuesday,
No, we'll go
on
Tuesday.
Monday.
No, it'll be earlier
So
on
plan
Monday.
on being there until the the
Guernsey's
wee
coming.
hours.
No, I actually think this will be fairly early on Monday. It's Article 14, but
After
it's
the
13 and
budget.
14. 1 through 12, you know, those aren't a lot of heavy lifting. There's a budget article, but even that doesn't necessarily take that long. So,
I just have one other little story, and Al probably could tell it better than I could, sure. But it was one of the stories that most touched me about the Burnett contribution to this town, and that was when the Boston Water Authority was coming in and seizing property. Al, do you want to finish the story for me? Because I'm not sure I'm going to tell it right. Robert, Joseph's son Robert, fought them back to only taking 20 acres. So I think our fighting on behalf of this house is very much in the spirit of the Burnetts. That, you know, way back then they were working to save what made this place unique and special, and also save the livelihoods of nearly half the town, as Al had pointed out.
Well, before anybody leaves, we want your contact information so that we can send you a reminder to come to town meeting. Is that what we were going to do with this, Krista?
Yes.
Yes. So we want name, phone number, email.
Email's better.
Okay. And legibly, preferably. So sign this on the stool.
I have one last comment, because I'm looking around now thinking like, okay, this is kind of like a now or never kind of thing, and this is coming up on Monday. So even if we said everybody in this room, if all of us asked 10 people, that would be 200. But if all of us talk passionately to 5 people and ask them to get 5 other people as well, then we could get 600 people. So what we really need to do is all like convey this passion of, you know, I almost didn't come up tonight. I was working late, and my kid, you know, but, and then when I got here, even though I am in support of this and I am invested in this, and then hearing what I heard, it was almost like, oh my gosh, how could we ever let this slip away? And
the other thing to think about is that the metaphor I use is Thanksgiving dinner, right? It takes all day to prepare, and it takes 15 minutes to eat it, at least the way I do it. And, you know, this vote will come up, and then we'll have a presentation, and then, you know, I don't know how much discussion we'll have, and then we'll have a vote. And 2 years of work will be over in an hour. You know, hopefully that'll go the right way.
Is this our last chance at this town meeting?
I never say never, but
Hopefully it'll go the way we want it to, but
If
if
it doesn't,
then what?
I have no idea. The answer to that is the owner, it's private property, it's his property. The town voted, they didn't support it. What does he do after that? I don't know. Could be anything, could be nothing. I really don't know. So,
Would there ever be another hack?
well, there could be, but he also could drive a wrecking ball into it the next day. I
Right.
mean, so there's no,
Yeah, we wanted to
you
do
know.
something now.
And I'm not suggesting in any way that he would do that, that he would either do it right away or do it at all, but we just have no way. This way we control the fate of the property. If we don't, we don't.
It's in our hands now.
How many people customarily come to town meetings?
Sally, you know that number.
200,
Last
200.
year, the total number was 229.
229. You know, there are articles on the second day that are of, I think, significant interest to people regarding changing the bylaws around medical marijuana. I expect there'll be a lot of people coming on the second day for that, but not necessarily on the first day. So, getting some,
I put it on the slide.
getting people to town meeting on the first day on Monday is very important.